The story that I've written is called Freebird. These are stories that you read about and possibly would like to visit. I find them very interesting to our own communities and to tourists. The title of the book, Freebird, was inspired by the old Leonard Skinner song Freebird. Iowa is called the Hawkeye State, and the University of Iowa football team is the Hawks. If you research the word hawk, you will discover that they are known for their quickness and keen eyesight. These birds are successful in getting their prey without much effort and represent freedom. Hawks, like all birds, travel great distances and are resilient. To the rest of the world, Iowa is duly noted for agriculture, farming, majority being corn and soybeans. But there is more to this state than meets the eye. Iowa provides food for other global war torn countries like Haiti, Palestine, Ukraine, Taiwan, Pakistan, and other countries. With the natural disasters happening everywhere, including our own country, volunteers from Iowa have reached out to help communities that may have been completely devastated by earthquakes, floods, and tornadoes. Where there is a need, Iowa's there helping those who are in most need. Something else that you may not be aware of is Hawks and Iowans are protective of their families, friends, and communities, and referred to as a family value state. We may be as smaller than other states, but that means nothing. It means we just have to work a little harder. So, just like a good neighbor, Iowa's first to respond, kind of like having good insurance, protection guaranteed. University of Iowa has a Writers Guild program, and many well-known writers come from the state. Some other facts that you may be interested are famous actors such as John Wayne and several other people, Johnny Carson. The first thing that I'm going to talk about is a Herbert Hoover, and there is a museum in West Branch, Iowa. I believe that Herbert Hoover was our 31st president. One last thing. The university is known for the research done looking for multiple cures of diseases such as Alzheimer's, cancer, Parkinson's, heart disease. Enough. Carry on and enjoy the rest of the story. The first stop on our tour is going to be Muscatine, Iowa, nicknamed the Pearl City, I would assume because of divers who used to search for pearls in the Mississippi River. Looks to me like diving for pearls may have provided a source of income for the city. During your visit there in the Pearl City, you can take a walk along the riverfront and take in the refreshing scent of the water and the air while closing your eyes and imagining the calmness that must have existed many years ago. Samuel Clemens, better known as Mark Twain, spent 1853 to 1854 in Muscatine working for the Muscatine Journal and was part owner along with his brother Orion Clemens. In his book, Life on the Mississippi, Twain states this, quote unquote, and I remember Muscatine still more pleasantly for its summer sunsets. I have never seen any on either side of the ocean that equated them. Downtown Muscatine has a certain nostalgia as you walk down its streets and take in the history of its past while closing your eyes picturing what it might have looked like over 150 years ago. Take some time to go up to the Mark Twain Overlook and view the sunsets. Twain viewed them as just awesome. Today, Muscatine has grown in size, but has managed to maintain its colorful history. Our next adventure takes us to West Branch, a small community of around 2,300 residents and the birthplace of Herbert Hoover, once again our 31st president. West Branch is part of Cedar County, which was originally settled by Quakers. who established the Friends Church, which now remains in West Branch, Iowa. The Civil War, which began in 1861 and lasted until 1865, came to Iowa in the Cedar County area. The war caused much conflict between those who were passionate about the war, between the North and the South, and the Quakers who didn't believe in war, and still are the same today. One of the most notable places in West Branch is the National Parks and Herbert Hoover Museum Library. This is where you will find the grave sites of both Herbert and his wife Lou. Continuing on, Freebird, Tales from the Hawkeye State. This is the about the history of the cow wars. The story begins in 1929 when the governor ordered all cattle to be tested for tuberculosis. Any cows that had been infected were to be slaughtered. This caused much of an uproar among the farmers in Cedar County, leading them to travel to Des Moines, protesting against all of this. Governor Turner was governor at that time. The farmers were unsuccessful and became angry, leading them to start a war with all veterinarians in the Cedar County area. Any veterinarians spotted in the area were met with hostility. Veterinarians were thrown into barbed wire fences, shot at, chamber pots thrown at them. Neither farmers nor veterinarians were going to be deterred, which resulted in calling up the National Guard and setting up camp at the Tipton, Iowa Fairground in Tipton, Iowa. This wasn't going to stop the farmers, and things came to a head when, after continual resistance by the farmers, forced the National Guard to resort to threats of machine guns and bayonets. Veterinarians were able to continue testing while being accompanied by National Guardsmen. Cow wars continued from 1829 to 1931. It did indeed result in all cattle being tested, many lives being saved, and with the vaccination, the TB, tuberculosis, we have a low percentage of those who come down with, or whatever you want to call it, with TB. Hard to believe that this kind of story could happen in such a small county, but it did make the history books. Next step is Cedar Rapids, Czech Village, and the new Bohemian District. Cedar Rapids is part of the Great Iowa Cultural Corridor. It includes 9 other counties, including Johnson and Lynn. Cedar Rapids is the second largest city in Iowa, its population being more than 132,000 residents. Czech Village and the Bohemian District are 40 blocks long and look over the Cedar River. Both are located on 3rd Street E, south of 8th Avenue, including the old Sinclair packing house. Czech Village on the west side is 10 blocks centered on the 16th Avenue southwest from Street D southwest to the river. The area suffered from an economic decline for many years and was nearly destroyed by the 2008 flood. The Czech Village and New Bohemian District banded together and, with the help of nonprofits, residents, grant opportunities, federal relief dollars, the state iJobs program, local foundations, private companies, individuals, an Iowa Main Street program, Czech Village, and the Bohemian Village began to rebuild. The first influx of immigrants of Bohemian began in 1871 when T.M. St. Clair and Company meatpacking plant began operations in Cedar Rapids. Following year, Sinclair relocated his slaughterhouse packing plant to the south end of 3rd Street. Jesus. Well, pardon me for a second, the lights went out. The Sinclair plant was successful and required more workers, giving the immigrants a source of long term employment. Word got out to both friends and relatives in Europe, resulting in more immigrants moving to this country and to the state of Iowa. This continued throughout the 1870s and created more housing needs. This led to an iron bridge across the Cedar River, a new church, St. Wenceslaus Catholic Church, and the only Czech national parish in the state of Iowa in the Archdiocese of Dubuque. Programs continued well into the 1880s and 1890s, leading to the building of railroads and commercial businesses, requiring more housing that resulted in a more prosperous and thriving community. By 1990s, the city of Cedar Rapids designated the area to the north of what is now New Bohemia and a wholesale manufacturing district. The first Czech settlement area, Cedar Rapids, was demolished and replaced by structures such as scale wholesale, warehouse building, lumber yards, etc. Many of the Czech businesses have moved to the south of the area by 1900, and the few that are left went to new locations. The so called Gymnastic Association of Cedar Rapids had used the old CSPS building and had built a new so called Turner Hall, the new railroad. Due to the new railed freight station developments, Zocalo was faced with finding a new location in 1908. The new Sokol Gymnasium had a grand opening in January of 1909. Now, most of you are probably very familiar with the movie Bridges of Madison County, a romantic drama that takes place at Madison County and stars Clint Eastwood and Meryl Streep. Meryl Streep is Francesca Johnson, an Italian war bride played by Streep, lives with her husband Richard and their two children. It's summertime, and Francesca has sent off her family to attend the state fair and be home by herself for 4 days. This is where Kincaid, played by Clint Eastwood, shows up that day while Francesca is sitting on the porch and Kincaid asks her for questions. She's willing to help Kincaid show him around while he explains he is a photojournalist for the National Geographic magazine and is photographing bridges of Madison County. This leads to a 4 day passionate love affair. Who doesn't like a love affair? Something romantic. Skip to present day, and it takes us to after Francesca had passed away. Her children, Michael and Carolyn, returned to the farm to settle their mother's estate. They're surprised to hear that Francesca requested to be have her ashes spread over the Rosamond Bridge instead of being buried next to her husband, Richard. Michael refuses to believe it his mother's request, while Carolyn sees through her mother's and searches through her deposit box. She comes across an old safety box where she finds a photo of her mother by Caldwell Bridge and a letter from Kincaid. Carolyn finds a key to hope, and not only that, but a hope chest. When she opens the chest, there's notebooks, a National Geographic magazine, and one featuring the Madison County Bridge, an old camera, a book, and some other mementos. A photo of Kincaid wearing Francesca's crucifix is also included. When Carolyn opens one of the notebooks, it gives details of Francesca and Kincaid's love affair and how they almost ran away together. Carol and her brother read on to discover that their mother tried to find her lover, but was unsuccessful. Michael and Carolyn begin to understand their mother's request and about their own marriages. Bridges of Madison County was a hit for many reasons. There are five bridges. The Imes Bridge, being the oldest and built in 1870 in Union Township, and named King Covered Bridge. The second oldest bridge is located in Winterset, Iowa, called the Cutler Donahue Bridge. The Roseman Bridge, made famous by the movie and called the Cedar Bridge, was built in 1883 and was destroyed by fire in 2002. Now we move on to another city, another town, and another story that many of us do not know. Spirit Lake. The legend of Spirit Lake is the largest city in Dickinson County, located to the south of Big Spirit Lake, the largest natural lake in Iowa. It begins in 1856 when three brothers in law, O.C. Howe, B.F. Parmenter, and R.U. Wheatlock, toured the area and decided to purchase land to build on. A year later, settlers built cabins along the shores of several lakes in the same area. Sadly, on March 23rd of the same year, a tragedy occurred. Oh, that's March 13th, excuse me. There was a clash between a band of Sioux Indians led by Chief Inkpadula and the settlers. On that day, an entire family were slaughtered, with the exception of four women who were kidnapped and made slaves. At first, the families and the Sioux tribe were friends, but over time, the family that welcomed them began to realize that there was a lot of tension and things that had changed. The settlers continued to invite the tribe despite its tensions, knowing how stressful this could be. Apparently, the tribe believed the settlers had killed one of their chiefs. The tribe became angry and retaliated by slaughtering their cattle and then slaughtering the family. The next place is it takes place in Iowa and right in Cedar County and several other areas as well as other states. The soldiers were known as Buffalo Soldiers. They were used to protect the New Mexico forts, helping in road construction, communication lines, and infrastructure needed by the growing territory. They were of African American descent and between 1866 and 1900 served at the 11th of Mexico's 16 frontier forts. The Buffalo Soldiers were often used to defuse the many Indian wars that broke out between different tribes, such as the Cheyenne and Arapaho tribes. Oftentimes, the tribes would drink excessively, become volatile, causing them to become aggressive towards each other and also the settlers. The two regiments were called the Ninth and 10th Cavalry. Eventually, the soldiers were sent to Texas, where they fought wildfires, and while in Oklahoma, prevented white settlers from being able to settle on Indian territory. These soldiers helped to prevent violence against the Native American tribes, kept settlers safe, and were able to diffuse disagreements that could have resulted in people being killed. Despite the fact the Buffalo Soldiers fought heroically in Battle of the San Juan Hill Battle, faced blatant racism. Buffalo Soldiers served in the Philippines in the early 1900s and yet faced even more racism. Sad to see such honorable men being harassed and ridiculed by others who had little respect for those who protected and kept our country safe. In 1940, both were integrated into the 2nd Cavalry Division in 1940. They were trained for overseas deployment and combat during the World War II, and in May of 1944 were deactivated. In 1948, President Harry Truman issued an executive order 9981 eliminating segregation and racism against Afro Americans. The last Buffalo soldier, Mark Matthews, died in 2005 at 111 years old. Today, visitors can attend the Buffalo Soldiers National Museum in Houston, Texas, dedicated to the history of the military service of the 9th and 10th Regiment of the Buffalo Soldiers. The Buffalo Soldiers apparently received their name from Native American Indians because of the color and curl of their hair. And lastly, I hope everybody knows the name Grant Wood, not just in the state of Iowa, but across the country, perhaps across the world. I'm certain that most of you are familiar with the name Grant Wood, but for those of you who haven't been, there is a brief history of the man and his art. Grant Wood was born in Anamosa, Iowa on February 13th, 1891. After losing his father in 1901, the family moved to Cedar Rapids, Iowa. Grant graduated from high school in 1910, then entered the summer term for the Minneapolis School of Design, Handicraft, and Normal Art. He studied with Ernest A. Batchelder, an advocate of arts and crafts movement and Art Nouveau design. He also studied at the University of Iowa and the Art Institute of Chicago. Grant moved to Chicago and worked as a designer in a silversmith shop, and then made an unsuccessful attempt to establish a jewelry design business. He moved back to Cedar Rapids in 1916 to help support his mother and sister. He built several homes for his family and a small cottage, and then a larger house for the family all to live together. At the end of World War I, Grant joined the Army and designed camouflage scenes. He then came back to Cedar Rapids and in 1919 taught at a local high school, and in 1925 he traveled to Paris and also attended the Academy where he had his first gallery show. Grant familiarized himself with Impressionism and Post Impressionism. His art was popular in Cedar Rapids and the business district, mainly in restaurants and hotels. In 1928, Grant traveled to Munich, Germany, to supervise the manufacture of a stained glass window that had been commissioned by the Daughters of the American Revolution for the Veterans Memorial Building in Cedar Rapids, Iowa. Grant attained national stature in 1930 with the painting American Gothic Art Institute of Chicago. There is more history here, and if you wish to learn more about Grant Wood and his art and history of the American heartland, I have included several famous paintings so you can enjoy some of the art. I will leave the rest up to you. If you choose to study about more about some of the history of Iowa, I recommend it highly. The song at the end of this video was taken from Leonard Skinner's Free Bird. I hope you all enjoy the history of some of the places in our own state and also some of the music that I have included. Thank you for watching.